Hello and welcome to the Soul Wisdom Exchange. I'm Regina Curtis with at Maitri. I'm a soul wisdom mentor, an intuitive artist, and an art channel. And I have my guest Robert here today. Robert Case is joining me, and we're going to talk about soul wisdom, the journey that it takes to get to know your soul wisdom, and then how we are using that in today's world. So welcome, Robert. How are you today?
Hi, Regina. It's so great to see you, and I've been so excited about coming on your show, on your podcast.
Thank you. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Robert. How are you known in the world? How do you show up in the world?
Depends on who you ask.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah. So I was the first person to go to college in my family, and I ended up getting a doctorate in pharmacy when you used to go back to school to get that degree. Okay. And I finished a psychiatric pharmacology residency, which is when everything started changing and my world started opening up. And that came with more. I thought that I was becoming who I really am. Mm-hmm. But it was hard for me to put that in perspective and at first glimpse and first exposure. And definitely, because the things that were happening were, in my world that I was coming from, very unusual and very in conflict with all the things that I thought I just spent 9 years studying. And I thought I knew a lot, but I realized quickly that I knew nothing.
I think that's so typical in our lives, but it shows up in a very different way for each person. Right?
Absolutely.
So I was looking at your bio, and there were a couple of phrases that really stood out to me. I loved your very first. This is the bio that you sent to me, and I put parts of it in, just for our viewers, I put parts of it into the social media post to introduce this podcast today. And the very first thing you wrote was, he talked to plants as a child and started listening as an adult. I really, really love that. And I think that is so, like, such a great example of soul wisdom right there, and the journey that we take to come into it. So for anyone who's listening today that hasn't listened before, perhaps I didn't introduce this in the beginning, which I normally do, but I define soul wisdom or soul wisdom languages as the ways that our soul speaks to and through us, right? Our ways of knowing and being or receiving information and expressing ourselves. And talking to plants, having that conversation with nature, or that conversation coming from a place of creativity and wonder and exploration, as a child, but then really started listening as an adult, like, that's really profound and such a great visual and tangible experience of what It's like to be in your soul wisdom language.
That's I forgot I even wrote that.
Well, I loved it.
Which sounds, but I have this experience a lot of frequently in my life, where my friends that are author and they'll say something, and I'll say, "That's great. Where did you get that?" Like, "You said it at breakfast a couple of years ago." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And so actually that thing that caused initiated me to write that, and for you to repeat that, gave me tremendous goosebumps in a way that the writing it doesn't impact me in the same way. And that was something that spontaneously happened, and that did not. It came after a workshop that I had. Couple workshops actually that I attended with Stephen Herod Buhner, who's written probably a handful, if not more, books about plant medicine and the lost language of plants and the imaginal realm. But I went to the workshop and I didn't get a great connection with any plant. But then the next day, on Monday, I went back to work but I felt strongly that I needed to go back to where I had just done the workshop, which was up in the North Georgia mountains at like either the mouth or the tail of the Appalachians, depending on where you're from.
Where you're looking at it from.
Right. So I went back up there, and I was immediately called to a plant. I went and sat with it, and I had a tremendous experience that I actually I'm currently midway in turning into a children's book, trying to turn this quote unquote shamanic event into a children's book. So changing the language, so hopefully that it speaks to the adults and the children that read it.
Yeah.
And it is the take-home lesson from that is something that, in my mind, in my heart, should touch everybody's world, especially right now, that there is this reassurance that everything is all right, no matter how it looks, no matter how big the problems or how small the problems are, everything is all right. Which, having had MS for 22 years, sometimes it's hard to convince myself of that right now.
Yeah.
And interestingly, before
yeah, go ahead.
That experience happened about a year and a quarter before I started with the MS. Which is very interesting.
Okay.
You know, for me, was it reassurance, but it was not, the content was not just for me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you brought up that timeline too, because, you know, in the work that I do with others, but also with myself, right? Like sometimes I tend to have these really prolific dreams or prophetic dreams. And sometimes they don't have any meaning until much later. But if I hadn't had them beforehand, when they didn't have the meaning, I wouldn't have them as a tool to help me through the situation that comes up later.
Absolutely. In fact, I think I would say a majority of these type events that I've had as dreams or something else, they don't really fully blossom until later.
Yeah.
And it seems like maybe I need to be, and I obsess about I need to be doing more and thinking more, but that actually I don't need to be. I need to be thinking less and doing less.
Well, maybe it's more about receiving and
Exactly.
observing, right? And listening. And it's not, I think it's a balance, right? Because there's kind of this, the way that I've experienced it and being able to see it, like let's just say like having the benefit, the perspective of working with others and working as a soul wisdom mentor, I get to guide others through this process, right? And I see it internally in my own process, and then I get to see it reflected and see it externally in the process of others. So I get to kind of see it from the other side of the looking glass, so to speak. And when you're going through that process, whenever there's some kind of tool or vision or circumstance that comes in, there's kind of these, I see it as these kind of like concentric spheres of existence that happen with it, right? Like you have the moment in which it's happening. And a lot of times that moment is really intense in the moment. And you can't really see all of the beautiful things that are going to come from it, right? That are going to grow out of that. Because in that moment, you are just in that moment. And so you're experiencing it in that sphere. And then as time goes by, you get to kind of have these other experiences, which moves you out further. And then you get to see it from another perspective. And then again, in another perspective. And so those kind of spheres or bubbles of reality really bring in additional lessons, additional insights, and ways for you to integrate that and then move through it and act on it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I completely agree. One that would happen in just less than 24 hours after that event was that me telling the person that I was getting engaged to. I told her about the story, and she knows that these sorts of things happen with me sometimes. And so I told it to her, and her response was, "That sounds great, but I just don't see the world that way." And it was said in a way, or maybe it's just me interpreting, but it felt really like, wow, there's part of me that I can never share with this person.
Mm.
But we did get engaged, and we did get married, and we did get divorced. So the warning maybe was there, but
Well, yeah, but it's
no, it was not
a
a bad.
journey in and of itself, right?
No, it was not a bad thing at all. We
Yeah.
both learned a lot, and we shared a lot, and we learned a lot about what really love and devotion really is like. When two people with disabilities getting married, there's lots of challenges, and people need to talk. They need to talk about it, but they don't always talk about it as much as, because it seems, at least in my camp, there's always some degree of shame or blame the MS, and honestly, I think that that is probably the somewhere there's a frozen something inside of me, a core that allowed that to happen. It's not punishment or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but there's something there is that something within me that allowed that to happen. And
When you, so it's interesting that you use the word frozen, and I don't know, that word seems to just energetically, when you said it, it holds quite a lot of meaning in multiple levels or layers. But let's talk about shame and blame for a moment. I think that those are two sides of the same coin, and they kind of feed off of each other, right? Like that would be a shame spiral or a sabotage, right? Like when we kind of bounce between, and depending on what it is, it does actually, I don't think it matters what it is. If we get into that cycle of blame and shame, right? It's like looking for something or someone or some experience to blame, even if it's internal, whether it's internal or external, and then kind of bringing that in, and that is experienced as shame, and then kind of coming back out of that, it goes back into blame, and it can be this really toxic cycle that we can get caught in.
That is really fascinating that you would use those words and dress them up in that way, or not necessarily dress them up, but draw that picture.
Yeah.
Of how how they're related. Because that's exactly what I think. I'm sorry, my nose is itchy.
It's okay. You're fine.
Before they put people out with for anesthesia and they give an opiate, they will tend, if they use an opiate, they will tend to scratch their nose as they're losing consciousness.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's interesting too.
That's very interesting.
Because it's like we're talking about a loss of consciousness in this little pocket in your energy body, and that it was created in consciousness, and it's consciousness that can heal it. So it's an interesting dynamic. But yes, the way you described that was insightful to me. That I know that sometimes I still feel that happen in my current relationships. That I sense this, this blame shame spiral is a good word for it. And frozen is interesting because after years of having MS, one of the key symptoms for me or manifestations was being overheated, and the overheatedness, because we know a little bit about Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine now, we as I know more about these things than I did when this all started, is that when things aren't moving, they generate heat. So even if that thing that is stuck, which is stuck in an Ayurvedic point of view or Chinese medical, is the cause of the coldness, of the frozenness, because it's not moving. But because it's being held in place because of the multidimensional memory that is holding it in place. And it generates heat. So for the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been feeling more cold, which is a big change for me. And I think it's a good change, because it means we're like a soul archaeologist, getting down
going into the core.
Yeah. So
it's a really interesting visual. So when you're talking about that, the way that I kind of experience it is when we're alive, right? Like our as living beings, our cells are constantly moving and our energy is constantly moving. And when we get to a place, so I'm going to go kind of like deep into the metaphysical here for a moment, but
good.
When our energy is wanting to move, right, and comes to a place where it's stuck, where it feels frozen, then it is gaining momentum, right? Like if the image that I get is almost like running on ice, like you're trying to move, but you're not going anywhere and you just kind of keep like sliding around or running on a treadmill, right?
Spinning your wheels. Yeah.
And when things are happening in the energetic realms, there is a counter, not a counter, there's a relatable, somehow related situation happening in the physical too, right? Like mind, body, spirit, you hear these words together often because they are connected. And when they're not in alignment, so if something's moving, trying to move in the energetic, but not moving in the physical, then that creates some kind of disconnect or some kind of misalignment, which then creates a vulnerability in the physical form. And so when you're talking about that, it's like it's building heat because it's trying to go somewhere and it's not getting through. And so it's either going to build up enough heat to melt the ice or to somehow break through it. And then that's when we say we have these, we have these breakthroughs or aha moments or some kind of movement happens where we're suddenly moving where we weren't before. Go ahead.
That's very reasonable. The bad side is sometimes the heat is not localized and it affects different tissues differently. Yeah. And that the mechanisms of dissipating heat either are not working or they're compromised in their own way. But
yeah, because that's if it's not spread out the way that it is intended to be, then it becomes very focused, right? And then that can actually create something that's detrimental. Whereas what it's really intending to do, right, like the purpose behind it is trying to help, but it may not show up in that way. Does that resonate?
No, you're doing a great job. At least in my understanding.
It's just an exploration, right? Like we're just exploring.
And so I've learned, because I studied Chinese medicine for a little over a year, and then I learned more through studying of herbs. I learned more about Ayurveda, and then that was how I initially decided to treat myself, was with Ayurveda, because speaking of frozen and not moving, when I was diagnosed, my initial symptom was I lost vision in my left eye.
Okay.
which speaks volumes for anyone who thinks about these things, about the laterality of the body and the purpose of having eyes and seeing, because
Oh, you broke up a little bit, or you're paused. You're
and through
frozen.
many layers. And you can go on, you get these shamanic visions or dream, and you still carry the power of vision with you
Yes.
wherever you go. And I think that was a beautifully amazing thing that I never realized, well, until it happened. So, and then, sorry, I lost my point here.
That's okay. Actually, I want to pause on that for a moment, because that is, this is a theme that keeps coming up in the work that I'm doing with others, is that I get asked a lot of the time, what if I'm making it up? Right? And my answer to that usually is it helpful? And if they say yes, then I say, does it matter? Right? Because it doesn't really, right? What is real and what is not? Like, if I think about an elephant standing on top of a basketball eating a peach, you can see that image in your head, right? So is it real or is it not real? Does it matter?
And does it matter? Real is we are born into three worlds, right? We have like the awake, we have dreaming, and we have the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Still carry the unconscious. That is in our dreamless sleep, is the experience of living in the unconsciousness.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing. That is actually when we're most in touch with where we came from.
Yes. Yeah. I've been having a lot of conversations also about astral travel and, dream, the work that we do in our dreams, because the way that I understand what happens when we dream is that we actually our souls, much like when we die, our souls leave our physical body, but when we are asleep, our souls can travel, leaving our physical body, but staying connected enough that we can stay in this place of rest and receive. So our physical bodies are resting and our energetic bodies are doing work on our behalf. And so that's why there's a lot of, to me, dreams are kind of like if you go on a vacation and you take some photographs and you bring them back, then you have like these snapshots of what you were doing. And for me, that's how dreams really read for me, is that they're just snapshots of what we were doing in our sleep.
Which is another interesting thing that you mentioned, snapshots. I've been working, doing some stuff, meditations and energy work, that I've learned as a way to think about this, is that our experiences, no matter how beautiful or how hurtful that we have, and we know that there's an infinite amount, everything that's ever happened to us is recorded, right?
Yeah, it's recorded energetically, it's recorded in our bodies, it's recorded in our memories. Yeah, absolutely.
So those things, you can think of them as like pictures, Polaroids, if you remember them.
Yes, I know, that's how I picture them too.
Is that they're actually stuck to the outside, that we display them on the outside of our aura. And those are the good things and the bad things, or at least how we evaluate them, with our brain.
Right.
And that's how we attract certain people and certain events to us, and that's how we repel certain things to people to us and events to us.
I love that you just used the word repel. That was a theme that was coming up in my dream last night, where I was repelling myself from certain situations and people, where we would have a conversation and I would feel myself like flying backwards. So I was writing about this in my journal this morning, and as I do, I often process kind of what the visual things are in my journal. because I find that when I write them or speak them or share them in another language, then more meaning comes in. It's kind of like that sphere, like those concentric spheres that I was talking about earlier, right? Like each time we visit them and experience them. So that idea of repelling and attracting and kind of wearing those on our aura. Have you ever heard me talk about trauma stickers?
No.
I love this. This is such a wild. I knew this was going to be a really great adventure having a conversation with you today. So I talk about trauma as stickers. Like they're like stickers that we wear. And the way that I envision it is, so we have acute traumas, which are things like accidents or death of someone that we love, or, you know, maybe some kind of violent act that has happened to us. So those really like those traumas that are happening, like a whole lot of trauma all at once, and we can feel that mind, body, and spirit all at the same time, right?
Yes.
And then we have non-acute traumas, which are things that accumulate over time. And the way that because I'm very visual, that is one of my soul wisdom languages, is I see them almost like each time we have a wound, an initial wound, whether it is something that someone says to us, whether it is an experience that we have that we kind of take on. It's like we take that experience and we wear it like a sticker. And that sticker then becomes a magnet to everything else that is of the same energy. Yes. And so that is also the same way that the law of attraction works, is we bring that in, we call that in, but with the law of attraction, it's more like an invitation. It's not necessarily, it's like opening an invitation. And then as we continue to call that in and attract that, we like open it more and more and more. And we have this expansion.
Can we call that a desire sticker?
Sure. You can call that whatever you would like. Yeah. We have like our wound stickers and our desire stickers. But the wound stickers they can become really heavy, right? Because they keep attracting all of these things. And I see our brains like a supercomputer that is constantly scanning our environment of any conversation we're having, anything we're hearing, seeing, feeling, doing, you know, basically all of our senses in the physical world, and processing that data to look for things that can attract to those stickers.
Right. Exactly. I think that I was writing the intro book I started, and I think I threw it away, this intro. It was like, when we wake up in the morning, that we wake up with, you know, with our conscious mind. Our conscious mind wakes up, but so does the subconscious mind. And that's where it, that's who's looking, that's who's taking in the billions bits of information, and then like trimming it down to this narrow, saying billions to millions, and then showing it to the conscious mind and letting it do whatever it wants to do with it. But it's only going to show it the stuff that is safe enough, that allows you to be your best self, your creative self. You need to feel safe before you can be creative and still nurture wonder, and before you can forgive, before you can be vulnerable. You need to build that foundation of wonder and innocence as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fear is like
becoming enlightened is becoming innocent again. It's not knowing everything.
Yes. Yeah. It's almost more, it's not forgetting, right? But it is, it's allowing. I think it's more of a surrender than it is. It's allowing everything to be what it is and not own it, not wear it, right? Like I love this visual of wearing it, whether we're wearing it on our bodies, whether we're wearing it on our aura, it doesn't matter. It's if we are holding it in our space and carrying it with us in whatever form that is. I mean, you can actually weigh thoughts in a lab, right? Like when people say your thoughts are heavy, there's truth behind that. those lower frequency thoughts like worry and fear and judgment and blame and shame and all of those, when we hold them in our minds, they are weighing on our body, right? Here's our mind here's our brain. It's not really our mind, but you know what I mean? Like, here's our brain. And if those thoughts are sitting in there, they are weighing us down. Yeah, our mind is much bigger. Yes.
Sorry, I froze, and then I flashed this, but I raised my hands and indicating much bigger, and that just flashed on the screen.
Oh, that's okay. No, I got what you were doing. You were saying, you know, our mind is much bigger than our brain, right? And we have our mind lives in many places, right? But yeah. So anyway, just kind of bringing us back into this how we identify ourselves, right? We wear it like a costume, or some people say we wear it like a mask. Or one of the things, I studied Reiki for a while, and I mean, I'm, you know, still a student of Reiki, and I practice it incorporated into my lifestyle. But when I was going through, you know, really like actively studying, one of my teachers talked about kind of our experiences are like lampshades, right? Like, we have this really bright light that is our true self, our true essence. And each of the experiences that we go through, much like I was talking about the stickers, he talks about them as a lampshade, right? And each time we come into some kind of judgment, or now my nose itches. It's really funny. Every time we come into a story, right? Like, we experience a story and then we put it on that light like a lampshade, and it dims our light, right? Whether that story is something, a way that we identify ourselves, or whether it's a trauma, or it's a whatever you want to call it, right? These experiences that we have in life where we're learning to go further away from that light or try to hide it. It's like putting on a lampshade. And the work that we do in our spirituality practices, or creative practices, or whatever you want to call them, right? Our inner work that we're doing is removing those lampshades and coming back into the brightness of that light.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So there's
That's
lots of ways.
Lampshade.
I like that one. Yeah, it really is, because the light's still there, right? It's just something that is, it's not, I don't know. A lot of times we talk about healing, and there's different ways to look at the concept of healing, right? In the more Western medical sphere of things, often healing is talked about as being cured, right? Whereas
they don't even use that word.
We don't use that word, you said?
You know what I'm saying? Western medicine, no one goes to see a doctor to get healed, and they will never tell anybody that they are healed.
Right.
It's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just this kind of like fix the problem kind of thing. But a lot of times the way that I see it is, it's not actually fixing the problem. It's just covering the problem, or
Band-Aids.
Mending. Yeah.
No, Band-Aid.
Band-Aids. Yes. Yeah, Band-Aids. Which Band-Aids, here's the thing about Band-Aids. I use this as an example a lot too. A Band-Aid does not heal you. Your body heals you.
Yes.
The Band-Aid is a protective layer to help create an environment that is more aligned with that aligns with what is needed in order for your body to heal. But your body actually does the work.
Yes, that's, and it, the way my experience unfolded with during the psych, towards the end of the psych residency, I couldn't even imagine that I imagined only that that a medication could never really help. But over years, I've come to think of it more as a cast or a Band-Aid. And I can go back now and look at all those things that I was doing and doing very well and teaching, that those are all okay. But giving them to a 3-year-old because parents think he has ADD already is a big mistake, I think.
Well, you don't really have an opportunity to learn how to work with it or what it's trying to tell you. And I think that is my kind of biggest issue. I think there is a place for Western medicine, and there is a place for Eastern medicine, and there is a place for body work, and there's a place for all of these different modalities.
Absolutely.
However, we have to be able to discern what is the best tool to use in each situation.
Wow. I just thought of something as you're explaining. I've thought of this a lot myself.
Yeah.
Is that asking Western medicine to be in charge of what is best is like asking your brain, your conscious mind, to be in control of your own mental mind, body, spirit health.
Yeah.
And that I would say is an error.
Right.
That you get the narrowest point of view or the smallest box to try to put the biggest thing in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It's just, it is a tool.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So that's a great way of saying it. It's like, it's putting value on one thing, one part of us over another, right? Like all of us, the parts of us, whether they're seen or unseen, have a specific use and a specific strength, right? And also within that, there are things that are not necessarily meant to be what they do, right? Like we can't ask our lungs to pump our blood, do the function of our heart, or ask our liver to do the function of our brain. And so when we allow each part of us, whether that's internally inside of our bodies or collectively in our experience, our tools, our strengths as individuals, our ways of knowing and being, when we allow them to be in their strength and also be vulnerable in knowing that this is not my strength, then there's harmony and balance and things work more efficiently.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
Although I love this topic, and I can talk about it forever.
Yeah.
Well, that's the conscious mind, and we decided we're not going to leave him in charge. You mentioned one of my favorite words and an often misunderstood word, surrender.
Mm.
And you also mentioned another word. What is it? In talking about dreams. I don't have I have like nobody, not actually my wife and I talk about dreams a lot. And she remembers her dreams very well in excruciating in detail that I would love to have in my dreams.
I love that you just said that. I have a friend who tells me I tell stories in excruciating detail. I just had to say that's hilarious. Anyway, continue.
So I had this dream back in, and it kind of encompasses a lot of the things we're talking about right now. Back when I was in a most miserable point in my life, and it was because I decided that because I was afraid of losing my Qigong Tai Chi teacher, and I was learning about surrender. I was learning about how to walk on the planet, on the earth, with the utmost awareness and gentleness, and being just a clinical coordinator for a hospital, for the pharmacy department, not everything, and doing really well at it. But then they promoted me, and I thought I would lose all my time visiting with the Tai Chi teacher and Qigong teacher. So I said, oh, sure, I'll do that. I can do that. Miserable. Like I was miserable, and I was having all these events that were beyond my capacity, my experiences. And I didn't know how to put them in perspective. One of them, a short story, is just having a dream one night um, where I woke up to being aware that there was just like bubbles everywhere. I was underwater and there was bubbles everywhere. And I was like just kind of looking around and panicking. And then I was like, and then realized there was all these other fish and salmon all around me. And so I realized at that moment that I was also a fish. And that I was struggling to follow them and stay with the school. And which, oh wow, I never really thought about that.
Yeah. There's a lot of symbolism in there, isn't there?
I've never, that happened like 20 years ago, and I still never thought about the word school.
See, the concentric bubbles, here they come. Yeah. That's so cool. I love it.
And so I'm like, I'm trying to hang with the school and move with it in the direction that it's going. And then I realized I got, have this other, the teacher within the teaching, not the conscious mind, but the teacher within the teaching says, you just stop. You don't have to do this. Is basically what the message was. You don't have to do that. Just relax.
Just relax. Yeah.
And I did. And as soon as I relaxed, I just got swept whoosh in the other direction, away from the school. And I knew that I was going to the ocean. And I was okay with that. Mm-hmm. And that was profoundly beautiful.
It is. I mean, can I share some of the symbolism of that for those who are watching? Honestly, like everybody can learn something from that particular experience, right? When reflecting on your own life in it. And I want to just share some of the symbolism that comes up for me in that dream interpretation is one of my, it's like a really fun thing for me to do because I see in those visual ways. And I've been interpreting my own dreams for so many years that it's really something that I love doing. But were you in med school at that point?
No, I was out of the school. It was either before or during while I was teaching teaching pharmacology at a nursing school.
Okay. So you had come out of school, right? So, but yet you were doing the work that was still kind of in the field that your schoolmates were doing. Yeah. So a school of fish, right? Like there's that terminology, but instead of following the same path as your schoolmates, you surrendered and you were swept into this deeper ocean, right? Like there's this fight to kind of like swim upstream, and it felt like a fight to you. It wasn't something that you were feeling good about. Now, that's not to say that we can't push ourselves and be challenged by something, of course, but there are times for that, and there are times to surrender, release, right? And so you get swept out into this ocean, and it's a really deep, big, vast place, right? And it's not necessarily what you know already, but there was a piece about it, right? You felt okay about that, and it happened really fast. As soon as you surrender to it, all of a sudden you're in this deep ocean. And I think that is really a very visual explanation of what happens when you do surrender to something, right? That change can happen so quickly. And it may feel like you're losing control, but in a way, you're not losing control at all. You're more in control than you've ever been, right? Because you're choosing your destination, even though you don't necessarily know where it is when you choose to surrender. Yes. That's following the guidance of your soul wisdom.
Absolutely. And there are things that either happen before or during. I can't remember exactly. there's two other events that happen, and I won't go into all of those. One of them was, I'm going into one of them, sorry.
That's okay. You're fine.
Do we have time for another one? A summary of another one?
Summary of another one. Yeah.
I appreciate the, because you're acting as this soul wisdom interpreter, because you're really excellent at it.
Thank you.
That you're teaching me are valuable to others.
Thank you.
And even when I can explain them and when I can't explain them, they're still of value because
Absolutely.
they speak to them, other people.
Yeah.
So there's, hold on, I want to think about this for a moment. Well, actually, maybe I won't share those two. They're too long, and because they're a bit bulky, maybe I'll have to come back again or hire you.
Either, and yes, both.
Yeah. But I do have another short one.
Yeah.
That I did one morning. I was living in a different city after this, and this was after the event that I told you about. It was I was wearing contacts at the time, and I woke up in the morning, and there was in the kitchen there was a puddle of water in the middle of the kitchen in the floor, and I like traced it back to this bottle of saline that contact lensers wear and use all the time, and noticed that there was a hole chewed in the bottom of the contact lens bottle, little sharp teeth into that. So I figured that there was a mouse or a rat living in my house, and so actually I didn't think a mouse could climb up. Well, I didn't think the mouse could get to where it was. So I thought I felt confident that it was a rat. And so I did Reiki-ish thing because I had learned that I could connect to animals at that point to some extent. And so I reached out with my mind. I say this all the time. Whether it's mantra meditations or with animals or plants, is I reach out with my mind in all directions. Or I started like, Great Spirit, I want to I reach out with my mind in all directions, contact the rat that's living in my house that got into the saline. And when I do, there's no mistaking it. It happens because you can feel the ratness of the rat or the coyote-ness of the coyote or the datura of the datura. Yeah. It's there and you can feel it. And it's different than when you just reach out with your mind in all directions and you don't contact things, because then you know that you're just kind of sending affirmations and wellness and hopes. And
it's just kind of going out, but it's not necessarily intentionally connecting with an energy. Just like I use this example to like if you have a good friend, right, that and you close your eyes and they were in the room with you, you would know they were there, right? Whether they were speaking or you could see them or not. There's this feeling. And it's the same way, like when you connect with an energy that you have, there's like an energetic print, like a thumbprint, but it's like an energetic print of the essence of that being, whatever it is, whether it's a tree or plant or an animal, Mother Nature. Like when I connect with Gaia, for some reason, when I was first started doing Reiki, I would connect in and I would say, Mother Earth or Gaia, can I connect with your energy? She would always say, yes, child. And I don't know why that's how she always responds. And still to this day, like when I connect, like I can feel it right now. She's like, yes, child, I'm here. And that's how she speaks to me. So there is like a familiarity that comes through and shows up, even if there's no physical connection. It's just energetic.
Yeah. And it's much more powerful too, even in the sensual realm.
Yeah, you can feel it. I feel it in my heart and in my solar plexus.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I contacted this rat and I told it that I said, I can't. I said, you can't keep doing, you can't do this. I said, we can't live together. And I said, and I don't want to kill you, but I would have to kill you if you kept living in my house. So I wanted to notify you that that you need to leave.
Yeah.
This is a lot more words than I said when it actually happened, but
it's the essence of it. I understand. Yeah, but that's.
So I told the rat, and I never saw it again until the day before I moved out. And I never even gave notice to the rat that I was leaving and it could come back.
Just knew. You had made a contract.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it was back. And and it was like, okay, we're cool. I'm leaving.
It's your place now.
Yeah. You can stay here for the next 24 hours. I don't care.
I love it. Yeah, there's so much that we could go into there, and I know we don't really have time to explore that, but there is so much power in feeling into situations. And I think the kind of main theme that I've really pulled out of this conversation is that we have multiple ways of knowing and being, right? Multiple ways that our soul wisdom speaks to and through us. And they all have a unique purpose. And no one is necessarily better than, or more useful than, or worse than, or weaker than, whatever than statement you want to make, that they each have their own unique purpose. And when used in combination and allowed to be what it is when it's needed and show up in that way, in that space and time, then we really are in that alignment, mind, body, and soul. And then we're in our highest ability, right? Like when we talk about our higher wisdom or our higher self or anything like that, it's not better than, but it is this elevated state of being because we're allowing all of those things to be who they are and what they are.
One way I use to describe this is that they're completely unique and they will never happen exactly the same again.
Yeah.
And that they are, and therefore they're in the moment. And they are an embodiment of multidimensional memory.
Yes.
Or they're not even a memory, they're multidimensional and they occur in a moment.
An embodiment of multidimensional memory. That's beautiful. I'm going to write that down.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you a question. I don't know if you have time to delve into it. I've had experiences of one, and they go together, but they're different. One, seeing the light in another person radiating from their chest or around them. And I've also had the experience of someone dropping something because they looked at me and they saw a light. And I'm never aware of that. And so what any thoughts about that, about seeing the light and being told you either that you have the light or you don't, or you didn't. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So my short version of an answer to that is that we, just like we have different ways of communicating and different ways of understanding, we also have different gifts and are able to tap into our, we'll just call them spiritual gifts or psychic gifts, empathic gifts in different ways, right? So for me, I see things very visually, but internally, some people see things very visually and externally. So I've had people, a friend of mine who was doing Reiki on me at one point told me there were sparks flying out from my feet and all these beautiful colors. And I've had other people almost get knocked down by like going to my crown chakra and just like, whoa, I don't like blew me backwards because they feel it in that way, right? So some people see it, some people feel it. We all have the capacity to utilize our own gifts, and yet those gifts are unique. You see, feel, hear, sense them, etc., in the way that is aligned with your soul wisdom, and someone else experiences that in their own way. So it's not to say that one person has more light in them than another.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right? It's just that some people may be able to physically, visibly see that, and others might feel it, or others might in some way taste it, right? Like or smell it. I was working with a friend of mine, and we were playing around with some aromatherapy tools, and I told her that I could hear the sound, the vibrational sound of the different smells. And she was just like,
wow.
I don't know. Like I could say that I could sing them. I could sing the vibrations of them. I've never really thought about doing that before, but when we were playing with them without smelling them, I would hear them and then I would combine them based on what I was hearing, and then we would smell them together, and they smelled, it was amazing. Like it was really cool to smell them together. And she was like, I never would have thought to put those two together. She was thinking about it from a smell base. And so it is just like you learn how to use your gifts, and then you play around with them, and you get curious, and you expand that, and you lean into it, and then you get curious about something else, and you bring that in, and your tool bag, so to speak, gets to expand. So this is my sister, Angela. She says, I'm an empath, so I feel when someone has a gift or gifts. Yeah, absolutely. And she says, because that's my soul wisdom, I feel. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Angie, that came through at 1212, by the way. There's a little number symbolism for you too. So we do have to wrap up our conversation here today, although we could talk forever. I say this at the end of every single episode. I really love having these conversations. But yes, come back. We can have another conversation. We can work together. Let me know what you want to do, but absolutely, let's continue the conversation. And for all of you who are watching, whether you're here live, thank you for being here live. If you're watching at some other later date, you're here at exactly the right time, space, and place. And don't forget to like, share, comment, etc. Subscribe if you're watching on something that's subscribed, so that you can know when we're going live again. Robert, thank you so much for being here. Thank
you so much for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I've absolutely enjoyed exchanging wisdom with you today, and appreciate you being here. Any last words for anyone who's watching?
Compassion, forgiveness. No, that's it.
Compassion and forgiveness.
That's what we are. Oh, and look for a book.
Yes. Look for a book. Do we know what it's called?
It's called Song of the Moonflower, A Gift of Peace.
Song of the Moonflower, A Gift of Peace. You definitely have a way with words. I'm going to read again your words. An embodiment of multidimensional memory. I'm going to say that sums up our conversation here today.
Yes. I wish we lived closer.
We are always in each other's hearts. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.